A few years ago, a behavioral psychologist ran an experiment. She studied men approaching women at social events. Two groups, same demographic, same setting, same initial conditions. Group A, nervous energy, asking interview questions, outcome dependent. Group B, grounded, present, focused entirely on making the other person feel understood. The results were staggering. Group A got deflected, dismissed, forgotten within minutes. Group B had women staying, engaging, wanting to continue the conversation. The difference wasn't in their looks or their status. It came down to one fundamental shift in how they showed up. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what that shift is. You'll understand the neuroscience behind it. And you'll know why Machiavelli, a man obsessed with power, actually stumbled onto the deepest truth about attraction. This one's going to change how you understand magnetism forever. Stay with me. If you're new here, this channel is dedicated to one thing: understanding the psychology of human behavior so you can live, connect, and attract at a higher level. Today, we're diving into the science of genuine magnetism, not tricks, not tactics, but the real neurological mechanics of what makes a person irresistibly interesting in conversation. And here's the brutal truth most dating advice refuses to acknowledge. Attraction isn't built by trying to impress. It's built by making someone feel understood. Before I explain how to do that, I need you to understand why it works. Because knowing the strategy without understanding the neuroscience is like having a chess move with no idea why it wins. You might execute it, but you won't be able to adapt when conditions change. So let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was 28 years old, decently looking, had a solid career, a perfectly fine person by all accounts. But every time he tried to connect with a woman he was attracted to, something shifted. He didn't get rejected outright. Worse, he got dismissed. The women would smile politely, engage with his questions, and then their energy would slowly deflate. By the end of the conversation, they'd excuse themselves to talk to someone else, someone who made them feel something. Marcus couldn't understand it. He was being nice. He was asking questions. He was doing everything the dating blogs told him to do. And yet, nothing stuck. One evening, a close friend, a woman he really trusted, sat him down. And she said something that cracked everything open. She said, "Marcus, when you talk to women you're attracted to, your whole energy shifts. You become outcome dependent. You're so focused on saying the right thing that you stop being present. And here's what's worse. They feel that. Your anxiety becomes their anxiety. Mirror neurons. Your neediness broadcasts itself through every interaction." That hit him hard because she was right. Marcus wasn't having conversations. He was auditioning. And that's where everything changed. A few years ago, a behavioral psychologist decided to test something that most people assume they already understand: attraction. She had a simple question that bothered her. If attraction is primarily about looks, confidence, or status, the things dating coaches keep selling, then why do two men with identical advantages sometimes get completely opposite results? So she designed an experiment. She recruited two men who matched on every visible metric: same age, same attractiveness rating, same clothing, same build. She placed them at separate social venues over the course of several weeks, and she told them to approach women choosing only one instruction: start the conversation naturally. But here's where it got interesting. Before each approach, she whispered different psychological frameworks to each man. The first man was told to focus on himself. "Remember," she said, "you need to impress her. Make sure she knows you're worth her time. Lead the conversation. Show her what you have to offer. His internal state was outcome dependent. He was performing. He was trying to win. The second man got a completely different instruction. Your only job, she told him, is to make her feel understood. Don't think about impressing her. Don't think about whether she likes you. Just be genuinely curious about who she is. Notice things. Make her feel like the most interesting person in the room. The results were staggering, but not in the way most people expect. The first man, he got rejected. Not harshly, but completely. Women would engage politely, answer his questions, and then their energy would flatten. Within minutes, they'd excuse themselves. Some would even circle back to talk to friends. The rejection wasn't overt. It was subtle. Dismissal dressed up as politeness. The second man? Women leaned in. They laughed. They asked him questions back. They wanted to keep talking. Some even asked for his number before he could ask for theirs. But here's the critical part. He wasn't saying anything extraordinary. He wasn't telling jokes or bragging about his accomplishments. He was simply doing one thing differently. He had shifted his entire focus off himself and onto her. That shift, from outcome dependent to genuinely curious, from performing to present, that's where the real psychology of attraction lives. Not in tactics, not in lines, but in a fundamental change in how you show up. And that's what we're going to explore today. Because once you understand why that shift works, you'll never approach a conversation the same way again. Let me tell you about Marcus. He was 28 years old, decently looking, the kind of guy who turns heads occasionally but isn't stopping traffic. He had a solid career in finance, made good money, kept himself in decent shape. By every objective measure, he was a perfectly fine person. The kind of guy you'd be happy to know. The kind of guy who shouldn't be struggling. But every time he tried to connect with a woman he was attracted to, something went wrong. It wasn't rejection in the dramatic sense. There were no harsh shutdowns or eye rolls. That might have been easier, actually. At least then he would have known where he stood. Instead, what happened was something slower and more painful. Dismissal disguised as politeness. He'd approach a woman at a bar or a party. They'd make eye contact. She'd smile. His heart would race. This was it. This was the moment. And then he'd say something like, "Hey, how's your night going?" Or so, "What do you do for work?" And she'd answer. She'd smile politely. She'd engage for a few minutes. And then her energy would just flatten. He couldn't pinpoint the exact moment it happened, but he could feel it. The conversation would shift. Her responses would get shorter. Her eyes would drift toward the room. Within 5, maybe 10 minutes, she'd excuse herself to go to the bathroom, or get a drink, or join her friends. And Marcus would be standing there, alone again, wondering what he'd said wrong. The infuriating part was that he was doing everything right. He was being nice. He was asking questions. He was showing genuine interest. He'd read every article, every blog post, every dating guide that promised to unlock the secret. Ask open-ended questions. Check. Be confident. He tried. Listen actively. He did that too. And yet, nothing stuck. The conversations never deepened. They never evolved into something real. They just ended. Marcus had dozens of these interactions, hundreds maybe, and they all followed the same pattern. Spark, engagement, flatline, dismissal, move on. What Marcus didn't realize was that he wasn't failing because he was doing something wrong. He was failing because of what he wasn't doing. He wasn't present. He wasn't genuinely curious. And most importantly, he wasn't making her feel like the most interesting person in the room. He was performing a script. And women could feel that script in every question he asked, every joke he attempted, every moment of his carefully controlled presence. They felt his neediness, his outcome dependency, his underlying anxiety that he had to get this right, that he had to impress her, that his value depended on her interest. And that feeling? That's contagious. That's the real problem nobody talks about. One evening, Marcus was at a dinner party with close friends. He'd known these people for years, trusted them completely. Somewhere between the main course and dessert, his friend Sarah pulled him aside. Sarah was sharp, direct, and she didn't waste time on pleasantries when something mattered. What she was about to say clearly mattered. "Marcus, I need to tell you something," she said. "And I'm only saying it because I care about you." Those words never precede anything good. When you talk to women you're attracted to, you change. Your entire energy shifts. You become smaller. You shrink into yourself. And the worst part, they feel it. Every single time. Marcus started to defend himself, but Sarah kept going. "You ask these generic questions like you're reading from a script. What do you do for work? How's your night?" But it's not actually about them. It's about you trying to impress them. It's about your anxiety. And here's the thing nobody tells you. Women are incredibly sensitive to that. They pick up on your neediness, your outcome dependency, your underlying fear that you're not enough. "I'm not needy," Marcus said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they weren't true. "You are," Sarah said, not unkindly. "And worse, you broadcast it. Your anxiety becomes their anxiety. When you walk into a conversation tense and outcome dependent, she feels that tension too. Her nervous system picks it up. She doesn't consciously know why, but she feels unsafe. Not physically, emotionally. You're making her responsible for validating you, and that's a burden no one wants to carry." Marcus felt something crack inside him. Not anger. Recognition. "The saddest part," Sarah continued, "is that you're a genuinely good person. You're interesting when you're relaxed. But the moment there's attraction involved, you stop being yourself. You stop being present. You perform, and everyone can feel the performance. It's like watching someone read lines they don't believe." She paused, letting that land. You need to figure out why her validation matters so much to you that you'd sacrifice your entire presence to chase it. Because that's the real problem. Not the words you're using, not your looks, not your job. It's that you've made her acceptance the measure of your worth, and no woman wants to be responsible for that. Sarah walked away, leaving Marcus standing alone in the kitchen. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about what he'd said wrong. He was thinking about what he'd become wrong. The shift from external to internal, from blaming his words to understanding his state. That night changed everything. What Sarah had identified was real neuroscience, though she may not have known the exact mechanism. In 1992, researchers at the University of Parma made a discovery that would fundamentally change how we understand human connection. They found something called mirror neurons. Here's what makes mirror neurons so remarkable. These are brain cells that fire not only when we perform an action, but when we observe someone else performing it. When you watch someone pick up a cup, your mirror neurons activate as if you're picking up the cup yourself. When you see someone smile, your mirror neurons fire as if you're smiling. It's like your brain is unconsciously simulating what the other person is experiencing. But here's where it gets crucial for understanding Marcus's problem. Mirror neurons don't just copy actions, they copy emotional states. When you walk into a conversation anxious and outcome dependent, your nervous system is in a particular state. You're tense. You're hypervigilant. You're unconsciously scanning for signs of rejection or acceptance. That entire state is broadcasting through your body language, your tone, your energy. And the woman you're talking to? Her mirror neurons are picking it up in real time. She doesn't consciously think, "Oh, he's anxious." She just feels it. Her nervous system synchronizes with yours. Researchers call this neural entrainment. Her body doesn't relax because your body isn't relaxed. Her breath doesn't slow because your breath is shallow. Her nervous system mirrors your nervous system. And suddenly, she feels uncomfortable without knowing why. She feels on edge. She feels like something is slightly wrong. This is the real reason Marcus's conversations kept flatting out. It wasn't because he asked bad questions. It was because his internal state was being transmitted directly into her nervous system through a biological mechanism he had no idea existed. Think about the opposite scenario. When you walk into a conversation grounded, present, and genuinely curious, not because you need something from her, but because you're authentically interested, your nervous system is calm. Your body is relaxed. You're listening instead of strategizing. And her mirror neurons sync with that state instead. She feels safe. She feels seen. She feels like the person in front of her is actually present with her, not performing for her. This is why charismatic people seem almost magical. They're not saying anything extraordinary. They're simply being in a state that feels good to mirror. Their presence is contagious. Their calm is contagious. Their genuine curiosity is contagious. Marcus's anxiety wasn't a personal failing. It was a transmission problem. And once he understood that, everything changed. Because you can't hide your internal state, but you can change it. I actually feel understood. Not just heard, but truly understood. When someone actually grasps not just your words, but the meaning beneath them, the intention, the fear, the real reason you said what you said, that feeling is intoxicating. Rogers discovered that the people who could deliver this feeling, even briefly, were viewed as deeply attractive, not just romantically, though certainly that, but in every domain of human connection. People were drawn to them. They trusted them. They wanted to be around them. Here's the critical insight. Most people go through life waiting to be understood. They're performing. They're managing how they're perceived. They're hiding the parts of themselves they think won't be accepted. And they're desperately hoping someone will see through all that and understand them anyway. When someone finally does, it's profound. This is where Marcus's entire approach had been backwards. He was so focused on impressing her that he never gave her the gift of being understood. He was asking generic questions, not out of genuine curiosity, but out of a checklist mentality. He was performing interest, not delivering understanding. The tragic irony is that women don't need another person trying to impress them. They're surrounded by that. What they need is someone who actually sees them. Someone who's paying close enough attention to notice the things that make them unique. Someone who's curious about them, not because they want something, but because they're genuinely interested in who they are. This is the psychological principle that transforms attraction from a surface-level game into something real. When you stop performing and start genuinely seeking to understand someone, you trigger something primal in them. You activate a need so deep that their entire nervous system responds. Rogers proved that empathic resonance isn't just nice, It's neurologically compelling. And once Marcus understood this, he was ready to learn how to actually deliver it. Now we arrive at the core distinction that separates people who create genuine connection from those who keep ending up where Marcus started. It all comes down to one thing: outcome dependency. Outcome dependency is when your internal state depends on someone else's response. It's when her validation becomes the measure of your worth. When you walk into a conversation thinking, "I need her to like me. I need to say the right thing. I need to impress her. If she doesn't respond well, it means something is wrong with me." That's outcome dependency. And it's the invisible anchor that sinks every attempt at authentic connection. When you're outcome dependent, every decision you make is filtered through one question: will this make her like me? You become hypervigilant. You're constantly monitoring her facial expressions, her tone, the length of her responses. You're reading for signs of interest or rejection. Your nervous system is in a state of constant threat assessment. And remember mirror neurons? She's mirroring that state. Her nervous system synchronizes with your vigilance, your tension, your underlying fear. Outcome dependency also destroys genuine curiosity. When you are dependent on her response, you can't actually be curious about her. You're too focused on her judgment of you. You're performing a version of yourself you think she'll like rather than being present with who she actually is. Your questions become mechanical. Your listening becomes strategic. You're always 3 steps ahead, planning what to say next instead of actually hearing what she's saying now. Genuine presence is the opposite state entirely. It's when your internal sense of okayness doesn't depend on her response. It's when you can walk into a conversation thinking, "I'm genuinely interested in who this person is. I'm going to notice things about her. I'm going to be curious. And regardless of whether she's interested in me, I'm complete." When you operate from genuine presence, something shifts dramatically. Your nervous system is calm. You're not scanning for threats. You're actually observing her. You notice the subtle things, the way she laughs, the topics that light her up, the contradictions in what she says that reveal depth. You're genuinely curious because you're not afraid of rejection. Your worth isn't on the line. And here's what's remarkable. When you're genuinely present, she feels safe. Her mirror neurons sync with your groundedness instead of your anxiety. She relaxes. She opens up. She reveals more of herself because she senses that you're actually interested in who she is, not in whether she'll validate you. This is the fundamental reversal. Marcus's entire problem wasn't that he was doing the wrong things. It was that he was doing things from the wrong internal state. Outcome dependency poisons everything. Genuine presence elevates everything. The question becomes, how do you shift from one state to the other? That's what we're about to explore. Here's what changed everything for Marcus. It wasn't a tactic. It wasn't a line he memorized. It was a shift in focus so simple that it's almost invisible, yet so powerful that it fundamentally transformed how he moved through the world. The shift is this: remove yourself from the equation entirely. Not in a self-deprecating way, not by becoming a doormat or pretending you don't matter, but by shifting your entire attention off yourself and onto her, off your anxiety, off your need for validation, off your fear of rejection, off your performance, and onto her. Who she actually is, what makes her interesting, what she's revealing about herself in every word, every gesture, every pause. This is what the psychologist in the initial experiment did differently. She didn't tell the second man to be more confident. She didn't tell him to memorize better lines. She told him to shift his entire focus off himself and onto making the other person feel understood. To be genuinely curious about who she is rather than concerned about whether she likes him. When you make that shift, everything changes. Your nervous system settles because you're no longer in threat assessment mode. Your mirror neurons aren't frantically trying to read danger signs. You're actually paying attention. You're actually observing. You're actually curious. And she feels that shift immediately. Because here's what most people don't understand about magnetism. It's not about being interesting. It's about making the other person feel interesting. It's not about impressing her. It's about making her feel like the most fascinating person in the room. It's not about getting her to validate you. It's about delivering to her the gift of being truly seen. This is where the brutal truth Machiavelli stumbled onto becomes relevant. He understood power. He understood that the person who controls the dynamic is the person who cares least about controlling it. The person who holds power is the one who genuinely focuses on the other person's experience rather than their own. Marcus's transformation began the moment he stopped asking, "Will she like me?" and started asking, "Who is she really? What makes her tick? What's she not saying? What would make her feel truly understood?" That shift in focus is magnetic because it's rare. It's the opposite of what most people do. Most people are so focused on being liked that they never actually like anyone. Marcus learned to like people first, to understand them first, to make them feel seen first. And that's when the real attraction began. Niccolò Machiavelli was obsessed with power. He studied how rulers controlled kingdoms, how leaders influenced masses, how individuals gained leverage in competitive environments. Most people remember him for the ruthless tactics he described. The idea that the ends justify the means, that you should manipulate whenever necessary, that morality is a luxury for the weak. But there's a deeper insight buried in his work that most people completely miss. Machiavelli observed something fundamental about human nature. The people who held the most power weren't always the most ruthless. They weren't always the most intelligent. They weren't always the most physically dominant. The people who held the most power were the ones who understood other people most deeply. The leader who understood his general's ambitions could manage them. The diplomat who understood his adversary's fears could negotiate with them. The person who understood what motivated people could influence them, not through force but through understanding. This is the Machiavellian principle nobody talks about. Power comes from understanding others, not from being understood by them. The person who cares about being liked is always at a disadvantage to the person who cares about understanding. The person desperate for validation is always weaker than the person who delivers validation. This is counterintuitive in a culture obsessed with self-promotion. We're taught to make ourselves impressive, to build our personal brand, to get people to see how great we are. But Machiavelli's observation suggests the opposite. The person who focuses entirely on understanding others, on seeing them, on making them feel valued, that person holds all the power. And this is exactly what transforms attraction. When Marcus stopped trying to impress and started trying to understand, he shifted from a position of weakness to a position of power. Not power to manipulate or control, but power to influence and attract. Because the woman he was talking to felt his genuine interest. She felt his attention. She felt his desire to understand her rather than his need for her to validate him. That shift flips the entire dynamic. She went from being in the position of judge, deciding whether he was worthy of her interest, to being in the position of fascination. She wanted to reveal herself because she felt genuinely seen. She wanted to keep talking because for once, Someone was actually interested in who she was, rather than what she could offer them. This is the brutal truth Machiavelli discovered, and most people never apply. The person who focuses entirely on understanding others always has the power. Marcus finally understood that power wasn't about impressing her. It was about understanding her. Now that Marcus understood the principle, shift focus entirely onto understanding her, he needed a practical way to apply it. He needed a technique that would communicate genuine observation rather than generic flattery. He needed something that would signal, "I've been paying attention to who you actually are." The technique is deceptively simple. It's about making specific, character-based observations rather than surface-level compliments. Most people default to what doesn't work. They say things like, "You seem really pretty," or "You're so fun." These are compliments she's heard 1,000 times. They don't signal observation. They signal that you've noticed what everyone notices. They're generic. And generic means you're not really paying attention. What works is something entirely different. It's when you notice something about her character, her vibe, her energy. The things that reveal who she actually is beneath the surface. Things like, "You seem like the kind of person who asks good questions, but doesn't always share what's really going on with you." Or, "You seem like you're way more interesting than you're letting on right now." Or, "You seem like someone who laughs at things most people would take seriously." Do you see the difference? You're not complimenting her appearance. You're reflecting something back to her about her character that feels personal and perceptive. You're saying, "I've been paying attention to you specifically, not to your looks, not to your job, to you." This technique works because it accomplishes 3 things simultaneously. First, it signals genuine observation. You're not reading from a script. You're noticing real things about her. Second, it invites self-disclosure. When you make a specific observation, she feels compelled to respond, to confirm or deny or elaborate. That response deepens the conversation. Third, it makes her feel seen in a way that matters. Not seen as attractive, seen as interesting, seen as complex, seen as worthy of genuine attention. The key is specificity. The observation has to be real. It has to be based on something she's actually communicated, through her words, her tone, her body language, her choices. If it feels forced or inaccurate, she'll sense it immediately. Marcus learned that observations are more powerful than compliments because observations prove you're paying attention. And attention is the rarest gift in a world where everyone is distracted. This was the technique that would change everything. 3 days after Sarah's confrontation, Marcus was at another social event. A rooftop bar, crowded, the kind of place where he normally froze up. But something was different this time. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He wasn't there to prove anything. He was there to understand people. He noticed a woman standing alone, looking at the city skyline. Most guys would have approached with a line. Marcus just observed her first. The way she held herself, the slight frown on her face, the fact that she seemed somewhere else entirely, not just physically present at a party. He walked over and said something he'd never said before, something completely honest and specific. "You seem like you're thinking about something that matters more than this party." She laughed. Not polite, genuinely. Her eyes lit up. "That obvious?" she said. And then she told him. She'd just turned down a job offer that she'd wanted for years because it would have meant moving away from her family. She was trying to figure out if she'd made the right choice. She was grappling with something real, Marcus didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer advice. He just listened. He reflected back what he was hearing. He asked questions that showed he was genuinely interested in understanding her, not in impressing her or moving the conversation toward romance. They talked for 2 hours. By the end of the night, she told him it was the most interesting first conversation she'd ever had. Not because he was charming or funny or impressive, but because he'd made her feel understood. He'd paid attention to who she actually was. He'd been present with her in a way that made her feel seen. She asked for his number before he asked for hers. That night, Marcus realized something fundamental. He hadn't used a technique. He hadn't performed a script. He'd simply shifted his focus entirely off himself and onto genuinely understanding another person. That shift was everything. And once he understood that the shift itself was the magic, he could never go back to the old way. The way of performing. The way of trying to impress. The way of neediness disguised as confidence. He'd finally become magnetic. Not because he changed who he was, but because he stopped trying to be anyone other than someone genuinely interested in understanding others. What Marcus had discovered wasn't new. Clinical psychologists have a name for what he was doing. They call it perceptive attunement. It's the ability to notice and accurately reflect the inner world of another person. To see beneath the surface. To understand not just what someone is saying, but what they're actually feeling. Therapists spend years developing this skill because it works. It fundamentally changes how people respond to you. But here's where the biology becomes fascinating. When someone feels genuinely attuned to, when they feel truly seen and understood, something happens in their brain. Their body releases oxytocin. Oxytocin is known as the bonding hormone. It's the same chemical that's released between mothers and newborns during bonding. It's released between close friends, between romantic partners, between people who trust each other deeply. When oxytocin is present, people feel safe. They feel connected. They feel compelled to move toward you rather than away. In other words, making someone feel truly seen isn't just psychologically powerful. It's biologically compelling. This is why therapists create such deep connections with clients. This is why great leaders inspire loyalty. This is why genuinely attractive people seem almost magical. They're triggering a biological response that makes people want to be around them, trust them, and bond with them. Marcus didn't know any of this neurobiology when he was talking to that woman on the rooftop. He just knew that when he shifted his focus to genuinely understanding her, something shifted in her response. She relaxed. She opened up. She revealed parts of herself she probably wouldn't normally reveal to a stranger. That relaxation and opening was oxytocin working. And this is the final piece of the puzzle. The shift in focus isn't just psychologically smart. It's neurologically sound. When you stop being outcome dependent and start being genuinely curious, you trigger the exact biological mechanisms that create bonding and attachment. You become someone her nervous system wants to be around. You become someone she associates with feeling safe and understood. You become someone she wants to get closer to. That's not manipulation. That's just how human neurology works. And once you understand it, you can never unsee how powerful genuine attention actually is. We've traveled from the behavioral experiment all the way through mirror neurons, Carl Rogers, Machiavelli, and oxytocin. But all of these pieces point to one final truth about magnetism that most people never understand. Magnetism isn't about being impressive. It's about making others feel important. Think about the people in your life who are truly magnetic. the ones you want to be around, the ones you think about when they're not in the room. It's not because they're the most accomplished or the most attractive or the most entertaining. It's because when you're around them, you feel like the most interesting person in the room. They make you feel seen. They make you feel understood. They make you feel like you matter. This is the opposite of how most people approach attraction and connection. Most people are so focused on being liked that they never actually like anyone. Most people are so concerned with impressing that they never actually understand. Most people broadcast their neediness so loudly that no one can hear their actual interest. Marcus learned something different. He learned that the person who holds the power isn't the person trying to impress. It's the person who's genuinely curious, the person who notices, the person who reflects back what they see, the person who makes others feel understood. This is why great therapists are so effective, why great leaders inspire loyalty, why genuinely attractive people seem almost magical. They've made a choice to focus entirely on understanding others rather than being understood by them. And here's what's remarkable. When you make that choice consistently, it changes everything. It changes how you move through the world. It changes the quality of your relationships. It changes the depth of your connections. It changes how people respond to you. You stop being someone chasing validation and become someone who delivers understanding. You stop being someone desperate to be liked and become someone who genuinely likes people. You stop being small and anxious and become grounded and present. Marcus didn't transform because he learned better lines or more tactics. He transformed because he fundamentally shifted how he showed up in the world. He became the kind of person who makes others feel understood. And that kind of person is magnetic, not because of what they have, but because of how they make others feel. That's the final truth about winning her heart. It's not about strategy. It's about presence. It's not about you. It's about her. And the moment you truly understand that, everything changes.